bet that was the longest time it took somebody to come up ever. Sorry about that. I'm just going to... He sings a lot as well. Sorry about that. Okay, so, good boy, Archie. So, you know, people are coming up to us all the time saying you're gorgeous, and they're always talking about the dog. But anyway, so I'm going to very briefly talk about inclusive design, and nothing could be more important when it comes to marketing and getting your message across than making sure that you do it in an inclusive way. And that's what AbilityNet is all about.
Slide 2, with technology came opportunity, vertical tab, opportunity.
So I can't see, so I've got this lady talking at the front here.
With technology came opportunity.
So very quickly to set the scene, back in the 80s, we've got the computer that came along, the PC, and everything changed. Now 90% of jobs in the UK use a computer of some shape or form. And that was fantastic news for inclusion, because if something about you, one of your senses, for example, or you have motor difficulties, you have challenges in that area, then there are choices when it comes to all of these options. I can't see the screen, so I use speech output. Somebody else might need a larger screen or larger text on the screen or certain colors. Other people might use voice recognition. I heavily use hotkeys because I can't see the mouse. And so there are so many choices when it comes to all of these components. And that tower that you see there is obviously quite an antiquated sort of site at the moment. These days it would be built into the screen or connected wirelessly from something in your pocket or halfway across the world or up in the cloud or whatever it might be. But choice is the absolute core thing that drives the empowering nature of technology.
Slide 3, the age of the small screen.
And then 10 years ago, everything changed again with the second revolution, which was mobile. And mobile is the power of the PC with you wherever you go. And that's incredibly empowering. And if you have some senses that don't work, then all these additional sensors that are in a mobile phone, the camera, the GPS, the accelerometer, the compass, all of these things, the microphone, are incredibly useful and really help level the playing field. But now that we're computing in extreme environments, we're computing on the edge, we're in the age of extreme computing. All of those things that I mentioned a moment ago, if you can't see the screen, you can get a larger screen. If the sun's on your monitor, then you can go and close the blinds in your office, or whatever it might be. All of those go out of the window when it comes to mobile computing. So here we've got somebody, she's sort of squinting at her phone, maybe it's a bright sunny day. You've now got a 4, 5, 6-inch screen compared to a 25 or whatever it might be, in loads of different environments. And suddenly now, every single one of your users, your customers, your stakeholders, have exactly the same requirements as somebody with a disability. If you think about it, somebody with a vision impairment needs good color contrast. This lady needs good color contrast. All of you guys, if you're trying to use an app on a bright sunny day that had poor color choices, then you'd struggle. Similarly,
Slide 4, in the 1-dash
here we've got somebody using their phone one-handed, got a cup of coffee in the other hand. So he's walking along, he's trying to use his phone. This guy is temporarily motor impaired. And so he has exactly the same requirements as somebody who had a tremor or Parkinson's who wasn't juggling their phone one-handed trying to use their thumb. Exactly the same scenario if you're driving a car, well, not driving, if you're a passenger in a car, trying to use your phone, bumpy road, or on a bus, or on a train, wherever it might be, or if you had too much to drink, or even a little bit to drink, then you have exactly the same, you're temporarily motor impaired, and you need good separation of tappable spots. You need to have a decent default font size. The minimum size on mobile, 44 by 44 px. So, all of these guidelines, which are aimed at disabled people, are actually relevant to every single one of your users on a daily basis. Now, this person's got a cup of coffee, so maybe they're on their coffee break. They've got a limited time. They're time constrained. What do they need? They need extreme UX to be able to do successfully what they're trying to find out or what they're trying to transact in the 90 seconds left in their coffee break, for example. They've waited a long time in the queue. They've checked their text, and now there's something else they want to do, but they've got a very short time to complete that. That's extreme UX is what somebody with a learning difficulty or even disability needs to be able to complete that transaction successfully, unsupported, regardless of how much time they've got. So you're definitely getting the picture, I hope.
Don't all use oversized.
So was trying to find a picture of somebody with great big mutant sausage fingers, but I couldn't find one. So just imagine that this person's got big, jumbo, grotesque fingers. Now, some of us do. Mine are quite slender, but other people might have great big sausage fingers. Some guys, maybe some girls, I don't know. And we don't all have massive phablet-sized phones, although obviously things are kind of going that way. But this person is permanently motor impaired or dexterity impaired when it comes to using his mobile because, imagining, he's got big fat sausage fingers. So, the parallels go on and on.
Slide 6. Cars and mobiles don't make sense.
So why have I got a picture of a blank screen here in a car? Well, this is in effect the UI, or 99% of the time, in a car scenario. And with iOS 11 and Do Not Disturb while driving, this is literally the UI of a driver in the car, a blank screen. And obviously apps that are designed to be consumed or used or interacted with on the go have ways around that. Waze, for example, allows you to wave your hand at the phone, and the camera detects that, and it will bring up a menu of things that you might want to report, like speed camera, heavy traffic, roadkill, that sort of thing. And then you can speak out the option that you want to report. So there are ways around it, but thought needs to go in because this is the age of extreme computing on the edge. And what do the options look like? We talked about options right at the beginning. Options are the stuff of life when it comes to making sure that your content is delivered in as many platforms, as many use cases as possible. And disability just comes along with that. Being able to be accessed by people with a range of impairments just comes along with thinking of things in an inclusive way.
Slide 7. The age of ambient computing.
So Anthony mentioned about this is a shameless plug for the Dot to Dot podcast, which is a daily podcast demoing skills on the Echo. And this is arguably the next revolution. So we've had the PC, then we had mobile. Ambient computing, as they're beginning to call it, all these personal assistants that otherwise were on computer desktops or in your phone, but had to be kind of invoked. You had to take a few steps or a few taps or whatever it might be to fire them up. I know there's Hey Siri and stuff like that, but you had to take your phone out of it. Or basically, what ambient computing is about is that it will be everywhere. It's just in the air. You don't physically have to touch anything or make sure, oh, where's my phone? Will it be able to hear me? Every room of your house, potentially when you're out, there will be something listening all the time. Amazon announced a couple of days ago that they're going to be bringing out some glasses towards the end of the year, which are Alexified. So, they don't do anything else. They haven't got a heads-up display or anything like that. They've just got a microphone and a little bone-conducting speaker behind your ear. And so you can have Alexa with you all the time. You can just talk to the air. And ambient computing is going to be big. We're working all the time with clients who want to have a presence in these devices, the Google Home, the HomePod, that sort of thing. And to that end, there's a couple, I'm going to do another shameless plug now. So here in Brighton on the 10th, we're going to do kind of a hack day, building better bots. Bots, you could arguably say, AI, and these virtual assistants are bots. They embody AI. Bots can also be, the chat bots that help with customer service on websites, or the Skype bots, aren't there, that can help you with a whole range of things. They're built into most of the messaging apps on different platforms. So bots are what we like to call, AI in all their different forms. And if you'd like to come and participate in that, we'd love to challenge you about what inclusive design would look like for the broadest audience possible, for your particular applications, what you have in mind, and how that can be implemented in a sort of a hack day there. And in London as well, we've also got an event coming up in November where Microsoft, IBM, and Barclays are all sponsors of that event, and they're all doing things in this space, particularly Microsoft with cognitive services APIs, which you guys hopefully will be aware of, and leveraging in the not-too-distant future, ditto with IBM and Watson. You don't need to do the heavy lifting anymore. These guys are handing to you on a plate the machine learning and the AI that they've been putting millions and billions of dollars into, and that you can leverage often free of charge.
Slide 9. How is product talking years ago? Stephen?
So we had a picture of the Dot before, and how would Professor Hawking, for example, use his Echo? And I'm just going to throw that out there. We could have a talk about it afterwards, but there are loads of ways. There is a lot of redundancy, as it's called, choice, built into all of these devices, from accessing it through the accompanying app on your mobile, for example, or perhaps for him, he would want to pre-program into one of his, into his communication aid, a number of key phrases that he could speak out. And I've checked. Alexa does respond to synthetic speech as well, so he could easily have a number of phrases, and getting her to respond what the weather's going to be like, what's on his diary for that day, via that method might actually be take less scanning and clicking with his switch than he would have to just by burrowing down through menus, etc.
Slide 10, adjusting to your needs since.
And I mentioned 10 years ago, basically the iPhone in particular has been leading the way. Android has definitely caught up to a very large extent, but the idea of making things inclusive and making the software and the hardware capable of supporting speech output that I would need to use on a phone, driving a braille display, for example, driving a switch. Now, Android can't be controlled by a single switch, as Professor Hawking would have to have, but iOS certainly can. And here we've got, I think this is an iPhone 4. Way back, there were so many settings. We've got high contrast here. You can see a bunch of other settings options there. Have a look in iOS 11 and in Oreo. There is so much in there now. It's absolutely ballooned. So what I'm going to do now is play you a completely bizarre video clip.
Let me flip this script. I feel privileged for all who can witness this. I am close to divine. Know the moment is mine, the moment of sign. I sprint. To all the squares that ask around, we getting it. My skills pay me. Trying to get a million, baby, with an adopted flow that God gave me. Tell whoever runners that they spot is temporary till I
think I got that one.
Tell Miss I'm on my wealth tip. So when we cash out soon, I'm just investing.
I'm telling you, this is how it works, man. There's a little camera right here.
So that apparently is a very real life bus stop. It exists, it's in London somewhere, don't know exactly where, but I've had assurances that it actually exists. Now that's marketing, isn't it? That's basically advertising for Pepsi in a very kind of frivolous way. But what if you were given a project like that, and you absolutely will, in the future, be having mixed reality, as Microsoft like to call it, or augmented reality, as everybody else likes to call it, related projects. In the future, ambient computing won't just be about talking and having something drop back to you. It will be about every sheet of glass that you pass being smart, talking to your phone or whatever wearable you're wearing, knowing about you because your device, particularly if it's had Google in it anywhere, will be able to tell those other devices everything about you and serve up content specific to your requirements. But if you were given this project tomorrow to create this bus stop, and now that you know about inclusive design and you care about inclusive design because it will make things fit for purpose, it will reach the most customers possible, how would you layer on accessibility or build in inclusive design when it comes to something like this project? I'm not going to give the answers again. I'd love to talk about it afterwards, but there are so many ways that this could be made much more inclusive for people with a vision impairment, for people with a learning difficulty. Whatever it might be, there are things that you can do that might be concerned with connectivity to other smart devices that have already been tailored for people's requirements, that sort of thing. That's just a kind of little hint there. What I'm going to do now, I'll just bring this up. Has that come up right? So it's got a capture image on the screen here. People have seen hundreds of these. Thankfully, they're not that common, and there are other efforts to try and get around them. Google has the, click this to say you're not a robot. It doesn't work on mobile or not on every platform. There are lots of shortcomings to other versions of capture as well. But in their heart, at the root, they are completely inaccessible because, by definition, they're made to be machine unreadable. So this would thwart the optical character recognition software that a vision impaired person would need to have. It's distorted, so it's really hard for someone with a vision impairment or dyslexia to be able to access. Now, I know they don't come along very often, but when they do, they're always on a form that really counts. You know, you've been spending the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, filling out screen after screen of information, and at the very last hurdle, you get something like this, or something equivalent to it, some kind of capture alternative. Now, sometimes there's a little wheelchair symbol next to it, which is what we're going to hear here. It's the audio version, the alternative for someone like myself who can't see the thing. Don't know why it's a wheelchair, but anyway, so go with it. What I'd like you to do, this is a little bit of an audience participation exercise here. I'm going to play for you the audio alternative, and it's not the same as that visual one, by the way. That would be too easy. So it's going to repeat it twice. If you've got pen and paper, I'd really appreciate you having a go at this. Or open your phone and open up the Notes app or whatever it might be and see if you can have a go at understanding what this is saying. Bearing in mind, if you get a single letter wrong, no cigar. You know, this is a code that absolutely needs to be right to be able to submit that form. So I would really appreciate it if you could try your absolute hardest if you've got some way of noting this down. It won't last very long, and afterwards we'll compare, okay?
9, 3, 7, 9, 7, 8, once again, 9, 3, 7, 9, 7, 8,
Well, I'm sure I heard some meows in there. So, anyone that was brave enough to even have a go at that, pat yourself on the back. And then once you've done that, turn to your neighbor, if they were brave enough as well. Please compare with your neighbor and see if you got the same as them. Okay. So, now I'm completely blind, and with all confidence, I can ask you to put your hands up if anybody got the same as anyone around them. No? Now, we can laugh about this, because on one level it's funny, and on another level it's absolutely criminal. Because what we've got here, forget capture, this isn't just about capture, although obviously it is. This is about inaccessibility. This is about uninclusivity. This is about doing things in a way that breaks that fine, fine chain that I need to be in place from start to finish for me to be able to use a gadget that's accessible, access a website or an app, and do all of those things. And if there's just one broken link in that chain, then it's, you know, no cigar for me. So for you guys, the internet's a sexy place, unless you've got a disability as well, and probably 1 in 5 of you have, and the rest of you will it'll get you in the end. So, you know, and as soon as you take your phone out, when you leave this Brighton dome, you'll be temporarily disabled on a regular basis, as we talked about before. So, you know, the internet is a sexy place for most people, but if you just think of that as being an illustration, of being an example of all of the different areas of inaccessibility, unlabeled images, keyboard inaccessibility, you know, you have to use a mouse, poor color contrast, all of those things, this is like an example of what it feels like to try and be part of that world. I'm just going to finish off with a very quick video clip of somebody jumping off a balloon at the edge of space, and I'll explain afterwards why.
Release. All right, now the whole road is working now. I'm going over. Jumper away. Speed 725. Showing Felix at a stable descent.
So check out that video online. it is quite a bit longer, so thanks to Mark for shortening that. So why have I shown you that? Well, this chap is called Felix Baumgartner, and he wanted to get 2 world records that day, the highest free fall and the longest free fall. So Red Bull floated him up into the edge of space, and as soon as he jumped off that platform, he got 1. He got the highest free fall record, 25 miles up. But he had this fancy HUD, heads-up display, on his visor in his helmet. It was super cool. It had every kind of instrumentation you could imagine. But as soon as he jumped off, it misted up. He was breathing heavily. I don't blame him. Maybe it was the cold atmosphere. I don't know up there. But it was completely misted up, and it was completely useless. So now he's hurtling towards the Earth, I don't know how many 100 miles an hour, and he can't see anything. He has no idea where he is. He's got no instrumentation because he's got no backup, no built-in redundancy. So what he did was he pulled his cord. I don't blame him, by the way. Much, toot sweet, really. So he didn't get the longest free-fall record, just the highest one. Now, inclusive design in a project like that would have looked like having, a haptic buzz at every 1,000 feet or a significant buzz at the point of which, because there would be an altimeter in there, it would know exactly when the designed point at which you should pull the cord was. So, or maybe it was speech, via speakers into the helmet, or whatever it might be. If redundancy had been built in, if inclusiveness had been thought about, then he would have got that second world record. And who knows, maybe perhaps it had even been a matter of life and death there that people hadn't thought about that project in an inclusive way. You guys are going to be dealing with projects that are going to be super fantastic. I can't even imagine what they're going to be like in the coming years, what sort of platforms, what channels, how you're going to get your messaging across to your customers. It'll certainly be things as sexy as a HUD and stuff like that. But if you don't think about inclusive design, maybe it won't be life and death, but it'll certainly make the difference as to whether your products, your campaigns are fit for purpose in this extreme computing age. I'll just bring up the last slide. So I've been with AbilityNet for 20 odd years now, as Anthony mentioned at the beginning, and technology has absolutely changed my life, as I flagged earlier. Technology is changing the lives of disabled people all the time. In what you do, you can assist in that. You can make sure that you're part of the process that is helping every single user. Arguably now, accessibility isn't for disabled people, as I mentioned before. Turn your mindset through 180 degrees and think about inclusive design. Then you'll think about it right from design mock-ups right through to UAT and go live. And because then it's not a bolt-on, it won't be dropped off. So think about things in an inclusive way. Think about all your customers and try your absolute best to be part of an inclusive future.